All right, so we're going to record our, at least starting, if not completing, assignment 2.0, vector facsimile. I'm going to go through what might feel like this assignment at a breakneck speed, but the intention is that you can, once this is uploaded to YouTube for replay, you can change the pace of the playback, you can press pause. We'll be adding timestamps so you can jump right to the moment when something is happening if you want to see something specific over again. But the big idea with assignment 2 is, one, get familiar with a handful of vector drawing techniques. You really only need to learn about a couple tools and one particularly useful palette in Adobe Illustrator, or any other vector design program you want to use. We'll be using Illustrator in class because we've got the program and it's very widely used. But if you'd prefer to use Vector or Vecteezy or some other kind of vector drawing platform, the tools are essentially the same no matter which one you're using. So we'll use Adobe Illustrator today, but the goal is to do a carbon copy recreation of this particular design. The very talented designer Michael Doré, you can see more of his work here. He's done a lot of, he was very, very busy in the 90s. He's done, let's see, where are his, let's do about, book features, where's his art? I guess we have to go to his Instagram now. He's still very busy and he makes like the craziest stuff, and a lot of it is done using vector as the basis of how everything's done. He does draw, as you can see, he'll draw stuff out by pencil, but then when it comes time to make the final version, he'll bring his sketches into Illustrator and then work in Illustrator to get really clean, geometrically precise effects. And that's the sort of thing that we'll be chasing after as we're working on assignment 2.0. Also, one of the best ways to learn how to be as great as the greats is to copy what they do and kind of follow along with their decision-making process and understand the logic behind what they created, the series of choices that they made in order to get to their final destination, and all that stuff. So we'll jump in here and work on this together in this particular video tutorial, walking you through how to do assignment 2.0. So the instructions say, create a new PDF in Illustrator that is 6 by 6 inches and name it with your last name, first initial underscore, in assignment 2-1. That should be 2-0. Let's update that right away. Thank you, Blackboard, for being flexible. 2-0 and 2-0. And then after we've done that, using the tools and techniques demonstrated in class, that's what we're doing in this video right now, recreate the art pictured above as faithfully as possible. So the big idea here is to make your final work as indistinguishable from anything else other than this as you possibly can. So we're not looking for like your interpretation. We're not looking for a kind of like visitation on this design in a different style. We want exactly this down to the very pixel, if at all possible. So I'm going to change my sharing settings in our online space to share my entire application screen so you can see what's going on as we're jumping around to stuff. So we're going to get the mirror effect in just a second. There we go. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is launch Illustrator. For me, that's behind the start menu right there. This might ask you to log into your Creative Cloud account, in which case you can just use your student email and active login as you would for any of the other tools that we use on campus. It's just going to take a second to load up all those drivers and bits and bobs that make this thing work. Illustrator has been around for a long time, at least since the late 90s, and it's remained a kind of industry standard for doing any kind of vector work. Whoop, got that X, okay. So I know I need to make a new vector PDF. Any kind of PDF you make in Illustrator is automatically vector based, so you don't really have to worry about that. To create a new document, all you have to do is click on Create New. and we want the units to be inches. So right here where you see like points, or you might see some other kind of unit, you'll want to make sure that that is inches. And just type into the width, we want 6 inches by 6 inches. And orientation doesn't matter because it's a square. The rest of the stuff you don't really need to worry about for this assignment. If we were to get into the realm of actually printing this document, we would have a lot of conversations about which kind of color mode is appropriate for which kind of printing. If you know that this is going to be some vector art that you're designing that will ultimately end up on the web, we would have a conversation about scaling vector graphics online and how we might want this to be an SVG file rather than a PDF. But for the sake of this assignment, our singular focus is just on the fabrication. So you don't need to worry about all of this file format stuff. And then hit create. And that will bring you to, actually, before we do anything else, I'm going to save this. And I'm actually going to save it to the cloud documents. This is convenient because, as you all know, with the deep freeze on these computers, as soon as you log out, anything you save on the hard drives is automatically erased. However, if you save to your cloud documents with the storage available with your FTCC account, then you can log into any computer with Adobe Illustrator. Once you've logged in, it will show you the files that you've got in your Creative Cloud, and then you can just open and work remotely. So this is super handy. So I'm going to save this in my cloud documents. You can see I've got a couple of other files saved in there already. And I know I need to name this. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it in there. And change the name. And hit save. Oh, it's an AI file right now, but we can worry about that later. We'll cover how to save this out as a PDF. Okay, so here's our blank space. And you'll see that Illustrator looks very similar to Photoshop, which you would have explored as you were working in the class previous to this one, DME 115 Graphic Design Tools. We've got, instead of Photoshoppy tools, we have some tools specific to working in Illustrator. The selection tool, or V tool, will select an entire object. Then we've got the direct selection tool. This is going to select a point. We've got pen tools, different shapes if you want to make different kinds of shapes, all sorts of other crazy stuff. And we'll break down exactly what all these do as we work our way through copying this image. I'm going to go to Window, and for my workspace, I'm going to do, let me see, I'm going to choose typography only because this is going to show me or give me access to a lot more tools that I know I want to use. And I definitely want, let me see, the other panel I definitely want is, I think it's under Object. I don't want that one. Where's my transform? I want these guys around. I'm just going to drop them there. That's good. Got the align and the pathfinder. So the pathfinder panel is going to be really, really useful. I found all of these behind the transform, which is Shift F8, and then I just grabbed those panels and dragged them over here so I can have access to them as I'm working. So this is the overall setup. I enjoy, of course, anything that feels comfortable to you is totally appropriate, but you will find that we're going to be using the pen and shape tools a lot, as well as the align, pathfinder, and transform as we're working around. Okay, what do we need to do to get started? Well, in order to copy this, I'm going to trace it for the most part. So I'm going to right-click on this image, save image as. I'm just going to drop this in downloads and then save it there in downloads. And then I'm going to place this image into my workspace here in order to trace it. So I'll go to File, Place, or Control-Shift-P, and then go to Downloads. There's the image and place. And now here it is. It's super huge, which is not cool because I can't see the whole thing in my 6 by 6 inch area. So I'm going to, with it selected, choose the Transform tool. And I do want it to scale proportionally. And I want the center to be, you can see I've got the center point selected here. So this little box of 9 squares is an indication of the coordinates of whatever point is highlighted. So if I click on the lower left corner, it's telling me that that point of the object that's selected is currently at these XY coordinates. But I want this to be centered in my 6x6 format, and I want it to fill my 6x6 format. So to do that, I'm going to tell it that I want the X to be at 3, so that's halfway between 6, and the Y to be at 3 as well. So now the center of this object is at the center of my format. And then it looks like it's a little bit wider than it is tall. So I'm going to set the width to 6. And because I made sure that the links were connected, it's going to scale the whole thing proportionally for me. So now the object that I'm starting with fills the format. It's centered in the format, and I feel like this is good and we're ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do from here is I don't want to accidentally edit or move what I'm tracing as I'm working. So I'm going to go to the layers panel, and I'm going to just call this one, call the layer. I double click on the layer title to rename it original. I'll just call it original. And then I will click, you'll see there's an eyeball, there's the title of the layer, and then in between them is this empty box. If you click on that box, it will lock the object. So now there's nothing I can do to this layer with any tool selected. You can see I've got my cursor is a pencil with a little do not symbol right next to it. So right now, there's nothing I can do to affect this layer. So there's this layer with the original on it, and now I need to create a new layer on which I will do my tracing. So to make a new layer, from the layers panel, I'll choose the little plus button down here. This is just like the new layer button in Photoshop. Same story, same idea. Oop, gotcha, thank you. Oop, okay. Adding new layer. So this one, I'll call this Final Art. And I'm just going to hide that panel for now. And then from here, we can start doing some tracing. So you'll notice that while this is a pixelated bit of art, the original was a vector drawing. And we need to we're going to, for this assignment, recreate the sense of this vector drawing using Illustrator. You can see how the resolution changes as we zoom in and out. So we don't want pixels, we want really clean, crisp, edged things. So the first thing I'll do is look for opportunities where I can use simple shapes to get the effect that I want. So I noticed that in the center here, there's a circle with the earth floated in the center of the circle. So what I might do is go to my shape tool and take the ellipse tool, and I can draw an ellipse like this. If I click once and drag, it's going to create this ellipse. You can see as I'm dragging around, it does all this wonky stuff. If I want to make a perfect circle, hold down Shift while you're clicking and dragging, and then that perfect circle will retain those absolute proportions all the way through. So there's a circle. Let's just do that again for fun. So the shortcut for a circle or an ellipse is the L. So if I hit L on my keyboard, it automatically selects that tool. Click and drag, holding Shift, and there is our circle. To select the circle to move it, I'm going to choose the selection tool, or V. And it's handy to learn these shortcuts because they will speed up your drawing time. So I'm going to hold down Alt and Shift together before I click, and then I click, and it's going to scale from the center. If I don't hold down Alt, it scales from the corner opposite to the one I select. So, but if I hold down Alt and Shift and then click the corner and drag, then it will scale from the center of the circle. So there's my circle. And we can already see how some of the contextual menus change in order to tell me something about the nature of this vector circle that I've drawn on the Final Art layer. We've got the fill color here. We've got the outline color, and the default in Illustrator is going to be a white fill with a black one-point outline. But the circle I want to copy is actually this like lighter tone, kind of creamy yellow, buttery color. So in order to change that, I'm going to select the object and hit the I on the keyboard to bring up the eyedropper tool. And now anywhere I click in the frame, it will grab the attributes of that thing, that pixel, and apply them to the object that I've selected. So when I click on, when I select that object and then hit the I tool on the keyboard and then click on that buttery creamy color, it will copy that into the attributes of that shape. So if I can click anywhere, I can make this green, I can make it the orange, etc. But if I were to just demonstrate that one more time, once you've got your circle there, make sure you've selected it, hit I, select the color you want, V will take you to that move tool, and off you go. So we've got that much done. I'm going to turn the eyeball off for a second on my final art layer and see what else I need to draw. So I need to add a circle. It looks like even though the edge of the oceans here are black, they seem to be bounded by this other circle that has this bronzy color in the middle of it. So what I'll do is turn my final art layer back on, and I will select this object and hit Control C to copy, and then Control Shift V is going to paste in place. So right now it created a copy of that circle and then pasted the exact same circle into the exact same position as the other circle. If I were to just hit Control V, it would paste it somewhere else. So I'm going to delete that, Control Shift V to paste in place, and I need this one to get smaller. So I'm going to do the same thing I just did with the first circle. Hold down Alt and Shift and drag this centered until it's looking like it's right where I want that bronzy circle to be. And then I use the eyedropper tool, I, to select the bronzy color anywhere. And now I've got that. So right now, if I turn off the original and turn on the final art, you can see we've got at least that going on. So we've got at least those two circles. I'm going to turn off my smart guides. So when you hover over something and it tells you words, those are smart guides that are helping you, kind of like training wheels to learn Illustrator. I'm going to turn those off for now just so that we're focusing on only one thing at a time. Okay. We've got another elliptical form here, which is this painter's palette. So I'm going to copy that as well. So I will copy the bronze circle and Control Shift V to paste in place. And I'm just going to drag, I'm not holding Shift this time, but I'm going to drag the ends. You can see I'm grabbing the center little white squarey thing on the edge of the circle, and I'm dragging it out to where I want the edges to match the edges of this green ellipse that is the painter's palette. And now I'm hitting I on my keyboard, select that, and now of course we have a problem because this circle is in front of the others. There are a number of ways that you can deal with this. I like to right-click and then arrange and send to back. And you'll notice that it's still on top of the art, of the original art here, because it's part of the layer that sits on top of the original art. So when I send it to back, it doesn't go behind the art. It just goes to the back of the layer that it's currently held on. So, so that's what's going on there. So let me turn this guy off for a second. And I know I need another ellipse right here, like a little black ellipse for the hole in the painter's palette. So I might copy, paste, maybe shrink this down proportionally, and kind of put it here. Let's make it black and see how that looks. It needs to move over a little bit. If you discover that, well, now I can't see it because I've got this palette in the way, you can always create a new layer. So I'll create a new layer just for this little dot so I can see what's going on. To move this dot to my new layer, you'll see it's selected. Whatever you have selected is going to indicate in your layers palette by a little colored dot showing not only what layer it's on, but that you've got something on that layer selected. So I'm going to click on that dot and drag it straight up. And now it's on layer 3. And if I turn off the final art layer, now I can see where this guy needs to go. So it kind of needs to be top edge there, bottom edge there, dragging it in, trying to make sure it's placed right where I want it. And that looks good. And if I turn on the final art layer, now that's in the position where it needs to be. So we're looking good. Now, things get a little bit interesting. I know that in the original, I've got this kind of like cutout thing where the thumb of the artist would hold the palette. So I need to make some kind of intervention in this elliptical circle. So to do that, I'm going to start using my pen tool. So the pen tool, the way, let me turn everything off for a second. We'll just use layer 3. The way the pen tool works is if I choose the pen tool, you may or may not remember this from the 115 course, and that's why we're playing around with this in such a concentrated way here in DME 215. But the pen tool allows you to create new, unique points and connect those points together using Bezier curves or handlebars in order to get the kind of shape that you're looking for in your finished work. So the pen tool you can use to create polygons, like if you want it, all you have to do is like click once. You always want to come back to your original point that you started at, and Illustrator will indicate to you that you've arrived at your final destination by showing you that little closed circle, meaning you can close the shape here. And that a closed shape means that you have lines connecting the points as well as these individual points describing what the lines are. To edit these individual points, you can move to the direct selection tool. So the difference between the selection tool and the direct selection tool is the selection tool is going to grab the whole object. It's going to universally affect the entire object, whereas the direct selection tool allows you to grab individual elements in the construction of that object. So for instance, I can just grab one point and move just one point around if I want to change the nature of the shape. I can grab a side and move an entire side around if I want this thing to look different by the position of that side and that kind of stuff. So that pen tool, if I hit P on my keyboard, the pen tool is that thing that allows you to draw a polygon of some kind. If we take a look at, so if we select this guy with the direct selection tool, or the selection tool, not the direct selection tool, we've got that square box around it, same as we've done with our polygons here. But if we use the direct selection tool, or A on the keyboard, to select one of these points on the ellipse, you'll notice that it's got these handlebars. And these allow you to alter the curve with which the overall shape is described. So these handlebars are super, super handy. I'm going to put that ellipse back because I know I'm using it elsewhere. But in order to get handlebars in any object that you've drawn, you can either hit Shift-C, and that's going to give you this tool, the anchor point tool. And if you click and drag, it will add handlebars automatically to whatever you're drawing. So you can click and drag once to add 2 handlebars. You can click a handlebar to make it go away. You can click just one handlebar if you want them to be handlebars on any given point to operate independent of each other. But you can make like cool, funky shapes and crazy stuff like that. You can also use these 3 tools, your selection tool, the pen tool, all these in conjunction to make some pretty cool shapes. So let me do that with our final art. So if I bring everything back by hitting the eyeballs up here, I know I want this area of the palette to kind of like curve in and do some funky stuff, just like the original art does, or rather, the original art does. Points that describe these changes in the overall look of things. So what I'll do is, I think there's a better way. Let me unlock original. I'm going to bring this to the top, and I'm going to make this, let me grab this object, and I can go to transparency. I'm just going to make this like 20% transparent. That way I can see things a little bit better. So what I did there was I moved that layer up, I grabbed that object, the transparency, I made that 20% just so I can still see it, but it's soft enough that I can see what I'm working on at the same time, kind of as if I were at a light table. Okay, I'm going to lock the original, go back to my final art, and holding Alt and scrolling, I can zoom into this little area. So when I select this shape, I need to add points that are going to bring me around here. And a good rule of thumb here is you'll want to add a point at the edge of something you don't want to change. So I noticed that this curve on the final art, or rather the original, comes in. Oops, I didn't mean to drag that. Comes in starting at about right here. So I'm going to click P on my keyboard and add a point with that shape selected right there. You'll notice it automatically adds handlebars to this point that describe the relationship between this point and its neighbors, and these handlebars are governing how that curve looks in the final bit. I've also got, I'd say it pulls away from the curve here, so I'm going to add a point there. And now I can start playing around. So I know I might add a point in here and hit A on my keyboard to grab the direct selection tool because I want to move just this point. And maybe I bring this guy in here. And now I can play around with the positioning of these handlebars. So I might drag this guy further out and this guy up a bit. And I feel like that's okay. And there you go. You'll arrive here after a lot of experimentation. So for example, these little blobby shapes, which aren't a regular thing, I could use my pen tool, and you just kind of like click and drag and try to like add points in a way that more or less trace what's going on. Maybe that's not good right there. Maybe that's like that or like that. Conversely, by way of further demonstration, you could use the ellipse tool, hitting L on the keyboard, to draw a rough shape of what you think this needs to be. So if I think, you know, that's the rough shape, then I can use my pen tool or my direct selection tool to grab one of these points, move it up. Maybe I want, you know, grab the handlebars, again, still using the direct selection tool to bring those handlebars down. Maybe I need to use the pen tool, P on the keyboard to add a point, A on the keyboard for the direct selection tool, and bring this in. And maybe that's sufficient. Maybe I'm satisfied with that more or less for that other palette shape. If I want to, again, still, if you want to just do it with your pen tool, click and drag, and then click and drag again, and click and drag again, just going around the edge until you've got where you want to go. And that kind of thing. So let me grab direct selection tool, grab these guys, and I know that I want these to be that cream color. So I'll select that there, just like that. So I know I'm making this look weird because we're going a little bit fast, but all I'm doing is using these 4 tools, the pen tool, the direct selection tool, and the selection tool in order to manipulate these shapes. So if at any point you feel like lost or frustrated, try to just pick your favorite tool and see how far you can get with just that tool, and you'll be surprised how capable you are with what just one of these tools can do. The globe. Let's talk about the globe. This would be a lot of pen tooling to get this done. We ain't got time for that. So I recommend going over to the internet, Vector Earth, and find something that's already a vector file. So Vecteezy is going to be a fun source. Okay. And we want to look for, this is free. That looks pretty close to what we want. Thank you. And free download, free license. And in a few seconds, it's going to download. Any one of these you find is fine. I'm not confident that this one is going to work because we want to check it out first. So I'm just going to go to downloads, extract all, because I don't know that this is truly a vector file yet. It looks like encapsulated PostScript, an EPS or a PDF usually contain vector information. If it's a JPEG or a PNG or a GIF, it categorically does not contain a vector because those are raster formats. But let me just right click and open with Adobe Illustrator. Do you want to retain the yes? And let's just see if we've got it here. And there it is. Woohoo! So I only need this chunk. So you can tell it's a vector because when I select it, it shows me all those points. So I only really need these things. I don't need this circle thing because I've drawn my own circle, so I can delete that if I want to. I'm just hitting delete on the keyboard after I select something. And it will get rid of whatever you have selected. And I think that's it. I don't want like any other intermediary shapes. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to copy this, Control C, go back to my assignment, Control V, and I don't see it because it's huge. So I can do the same thing that I did at the very beginning and universally change the size of all of this using the transform thing. So this is more or less in the center vertically. So I'm going to put that at 3 on the x-axis. And then right now that's 21 inches wide. I know it probably only needs to be like 1 inch. So I'll just put 1 there and hit tab. And that will automatically resize it to what I need it to be. I can click in here actually and use the up or down arrow to alter the proportions of this thing on the fly. So let me just move that up here. I feel like that's pretty close. I can hold shift and rescale this. That's not bad. It's not a dead ringer for the final art, but I'm not worried about it. You know, anytime that we can find a feasible shortcut to get to where we want to go is totally permissible. All right, so this needs to be gold. And so I'm going to turn off the original now just so I can do what I'm doing. Boop. And this needs to be gold, so I'll select gold. And then I know that I need a black circle for the oceans inside of this. So I'll select the gold circle, and I'll hit Control-C to copy, Control-Shift-V to paste in place, I on my keyboard to select the black. And now I need to send it back just one. Right now, because I just pasted this in here, this is the topmost object. It's on top of the continents that I pasted in just a second ago. So I'll right-click and arrange. And I don't want to send it all the way to back, but I'm going to send it backwards. So just back 1 bit. And there are the continents. I want to resize this to center. So I'm just holding down Control and Shift until I see the continents reach the edge of that gold circle. And now I've got something very similar to what the original showed. So anytime you can find a shortcut, great. I fully embrace it, encourage it. In fact, let me see. The black circle, is that right on? Maybe make that a little bit larger. So I'm just going to do until that's right, kind of like right where it is there. Because I noticed that the bronzy gold circle that I drew is probably a little bit too big, maybe. Bring that in. Bring this guy in slightly. So it's right there. This is much easier. Okay. And then let me zoom out. Turn off the original. And that looks, I feel pretty good with that. So that saved me a whole bunch of time. So thank you for coming. Globe drawing that someone else did. Don't need to save it. And now that's saved in there. And we've got at least that much done. So we've got at least the globe palette thing done. Now we have to play with some of this other stuff. So we've got a column that kind of sits on top of things. If I just jump back over to our inspiration image over here, I can see that the column sits on top of the palette and behind the ribbon and has this kind of like linear quality thing going on. So now we get into some of that problem solving with slicing or playing with our Pathfinder palette. So we're going to jump into exactly how that works now. So before we look at all of exactly how that Pathfinder palette works, let me just create a new layer. Before we start tracing all that stuff, I'm just going to create a scratch layer so we can demonstrate how this tool works. So scratch. I can turn this on and off. I don't have to worry about it. All right, so on my scratch layer, let's make a shape. So I know that L on the keyboard creates a circle. Coincidentally, M on the keyboard makes a box. I don't really know where those come from. Bless you. And so I've got these two shapes. Let's say that I want let me make this another color just for fun, so we can see what's going on. So we've got a circle and a square, and let's say I only want this shape in here, the shape that is described by where the circle and square overlap each other, and I want that to be a different color. In order to slice these apart from each other, select both of them together, and then you'll want your Pathfinder tool. And what each of these does is some different flavor of slicing objects. So if I want to combine these into or unite them into one single object, I can click this button and now they are the one same object. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. If I want just the back one to be saved, then I'll hit that button, and that'll be done. If I want just the thing where they intersect to exist, click on that, and there it goes. If I want the opposite of that to happen, click on that one. So you get the idea. In this case, I want to retain all three of these shapes, but I want them to be unique from each other. I will hit the divide button, and now it doesn't really look like anything happened, but if I use my direct selection tool and grab one of these, you'll see that they are in fact three separate objects that you can manipulate independent of each other. And this is handy because I see this kind of thing happening here where there's one shape, this column shape, that stripes its way through the palette. There's the ellipse of the palette itself, and where these lines intersect, we want to be able to recolor these things so that they are separate to each other, but still retain their actual character. So if I go back to my art, and I'm just going to turn off my demo layer for now. On my final art layer where my palette is, I can see that the stripe kind of goes straight through, gets all jaggedy, it comes back up, and then folds into the capital part of this column. So I want to think in as basic a shape as I possibly can to start. And I'll use the rectangle tool here to make just a rectangle that looks like the column. And I'm just going to draw it there and extend it beyond the jaggedy part down here just for now to get the overall rough shape in. So there's my rough shape, and I want this, but it appears as though there's also kind of like another shape happening in here. There are several layers of these that indicate kind of like the fluting of the column. So I'm going to copy this shape. I'm going to paste it in place again with that Control-Shift-V, and I'm going to hold down Alt and grab the side of the box and drag it in. So I've just kind of like, I've got two boxes here, but I'm just dragging it in until it aligns with the line there. In fact, let me zoom in a little bit. And it looks like it needs to come out a little bit like that. So now I've got these two, if I just extend this so we can see it more clearly, I've got two rectangles, and the edges of these rectangles help me trace the lines of this column. I'm doing this in the shapes because I want to be able to divide these later in order to color them slightly differently to match the final art or the original art that we were starting with. So I'm going to do this again for each of these pairs of lines. So I'm going to copy with my more narrow box now. I'm going to copy this, and then holding down Alt, grabbing the sides, bringing it in like that. Control C to copy, Control-Shift-V to paste in place, bringing this in again for these two little guys, and then copy that, Control-Shift-V to paste in place again, and finally in to match these. So if I drag to select these boxes, the edges of these boxes, I can see, I need another box right there for the outer edge. I can see that I've got lines that copy the lines in the original design. So I'm just going to copy this guy, Control-Shift-V to paste in place, grab the center, bring it in till it's right there where I think it needs to be. And I'm clicking and dragging from an empty space. So you can click and drag from the artboard. I'm just making sure that I'm not clicking and dragging or clicking inside of another object because I might move it, but I'm clicking in an empty space and dragging whatever happens to be inside of that zone that I clicked and dragged. It's going to select everything. So there are all of those lines. I know that I want these to be divided, but I want to keep all of these lines, all these separate shapes as they'll be divided from each other because I know I want to color these with different colors. So I'll click on that divide button. And now, even though it doesn't look like anything's happening, if I click on the direct selection tool, I can see that this is its own line. So that's handy because I know that inside, even though up here it's like black and green, inside I've got these column lines, and down here I've got column lines as well. So let's play with that a little bit. So if I hit my direct selection tool, I can select this. I'm holding down Shift to select multiple things at the same time because I want to select every other one. When I clicked and dragged, it just grabbed everything, but I only want to select these guys right here together. So I'm going to click on that one, hold Shift, click and click and click, and I know that these need to be black, so I'll use my eyedropper tool to select black, and now those column lines are black. So if I turn my original back on, actually if I come back out here, I can see, oops, I can see that they're black all through here. They're gold and cream in the middle where the palette overlaps, and then they kind of disappear up top. So I can use the divide tool to get that same effect by using the palette shape with those rectangular shapes at the same time. So I'm going to come back over to here, and I'm just going to zoom out. And I might want, I know that I've got some weird overlappy stuff happening with these brushes and these other shapes, so I don't want to mess around with the palette. Maybe I just want to use the shape of the palette to cut out these other things going on. So what I'll do is I will copy the palette, I'll paste it in place, and then holding down Shift, I'll click and drag all of these other bits. So now I've got a copy of the palette, not my original palette, and these rectangles selected, and then I can hit divide, and even though it doesn't look like anything happened, it did cut all of those shapes apart from each other. And I'm going to use my direct selection tool to delete this side of the palette and that side of the palette. And I know that if I'm looking at here, only the two outer rectangles are really used, but these inner ones go away at the capital. So I'm just going to zoom in here, and maybe instead of deleting these, maybe I'll delete these ones up top, but I'll hold down Shift and select all these guys, and maybe they can be united together into one shape. And I want that to be black using the eyedropper tool. So that's that bit dealt with. And now I can select, holding down Shift and selecting the ones I want to be gold, using my eyedropper tool to get those. And then these are the bronzies. Again, I'm using the direct selection tool, holding down Shift to select, and I want these to be that bronze color. And if I zoom out, we're getting there. So I want the globe to be on top, so I can select all those globe shapes and do the lines. Okay, so the lines are totally behind these circles. So I held down Shift and selected, right-click this, arrange, bring to front, and now they're on top. If I turn off my original, now we're getting somewhere. So that's looking pretty good. Another cheat, I could draw a shape and divide all of this stuff out using the separation tool, but if I put a white shape on a white background, no one will know it's really there. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to use my pen tool and just draw a shape that looks like the shape that's here in the original. Bring it out and around, and again, close that shape. And now I want, using the eyedropper tool, I'll click on the white space, and now that white shape makes it look as though this column kind of breaks and hovers in the way that it does in the final art. So if I turn off my original now and zoom out, we've got at least that much done. So the rest of this stuff, if we take a look at the things, we can, so what we've looked at is using the pen tool, using shape tools, altering shapes, and then also using the capabilities of the Pathfinder palette in order to divide, unite, combine, and otherwise manipulate all of the things that we've made using the tools that we've learned up to this point. From here on, you can use all of these tools in any way you see fit in order to get to that final destination of seeing all of these things in the original art show up in your version of this. So for example, if we were to tackle the column, the capital up here, you might draw this whole thing with your pen tool and then place it on top of the column here that we drew with the rectangles in order to make it look like it all, the lines all flow into each other really smoothly. You might draw just one leaf in the outer wreath bit, and then copy paste that all the way down through the outer edge. You might notice that the overall shape of this thing is a circle, so you might draw an ellipse like we had done in the very beginning. And then the same way that we had cut out or added this little dip into the palette shape, you can add points to that circle and then move and manipulate those points to get them to dip in as though they follow the edge of the leaves in the wreath. The banner, in fact, let's do the banner together because that'll be fun. Before we sign off, let's do the banner just for funsies. Okay, so if we're doing the banner, I might make like an ellipse that follows kind of like the top edge of this thing, and then I might drag this ellipse down and see how I might change the proportions so it follows the bottom edge. Use the M on the keyboard to make a rectangle. So let's just make a rectangle like that, kind of bringing it into that orange shape that I want. And now if I select all of these and do the little divide thing, now they're all separate. But if now I can go in using my direct selection tool and just delete the stuff I don't want you, thank you for coming, off you go. And now I've got this shape that I want to be the orange, and then I can place the text on here. I will say I'm not going to force anyone to copy this exact font with the lettering, because that would be really challenging, because I don't think that we have this font on our computer. So don't sweat the lettering. If you're running out of time, skip the lettering and it won't hurt your grade. I can use the direct selection tool to maybe move, just using the arrows to nudge that point closer to where I want it to be, and off we go. For the flags on the side, I could use my pen tool and let's see, click, and just clicking once because I don't want any curves. And there we go. If I want that to go end up over here, I can Control C, Control V to paste, right click on this, and then choose transform, reflect, and vertical. We want it to flip on that vertical axis and hit OK. And now it's flipped, and now it's over here. And let's say like, oh, it's, one is kind of higher than the other. If I select both of these and choose my align tool, I can align to top just like you would do in like Microsoft Word or in Photoshop. And there you go. So there's that flipping capability available in there as well. I do recommend get started with this, but then I recommend checking these videos out because they're going to show you some of those other techniques and tools that we've covered in class, but use them in ways that are really unique and interesting and kind of out there and entertaining and a lot of fun. So that gets us as far as we want to go into doing assignment 2.0. All you really need to do from there is play around with these tools, and the rest of this is really a logic game. Like, which thing do I need to draw first? Which thing do I want to be on top of the other thing? How do I want to stack these things to get the effect that I want? That kind of stuff. So it's really more a game of putting things in the right order than it is necessarily being a master with these tools. As long as you can make a shape, you can stack shapes, you can use the pen tool, then you could theoretically do this entire assignment just with the pen tool and be very, very successful with it. Okay, we got to the part now where I want to hear from you guys. What questions do you have, or would you like to see anything done again? Or what are you guys thinking? What are you guys feeling? Yes?
How did you, for your workspace, how do you put those, the other tools there?
Oh, yeah, great question. So any palette you want is listed. If you go to Window, everything is in here. And obviously there are loads of tools. So like the navigator is going to show you where in the viewport your art is. So this is very identical to the navigator in Photoshop. I'll just close that for now. For these guys, for our Divide, Unite, Pathfinder tools, go to Window and look for Pathfinder. This is also inside of the Transform palette. So if you hit Transform, it will bring your Transform, it'll grab your Align tools, and it'll grab your Pathfinder tool. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. Any other thoughts, reactions? Anything goes. All right, as always, if you get stuck on anything, send me an email. And if you can't find the answer online, this is one of those wonderful instances where Google does have the answers. So this is not proprietary information just to my brain or this class. The truth is out there, and you are more than welcome to kind of like the way that we do some quizzes sometimes. You can Google the answers in order to get to where you want to go. And all the techniques you learn in copying this will make assignment 2.1 way easier, where you'll be creating a logo of your own with similar structure to this overall structure, but looking at creating your own art for any kind of team that you want to do. I will say, by way of useful help, there are you can download sports insignia from any team to see how they constructed their stuff. So any one of these is going to allow you to download, like if I want to see what the Orlando Magic logo is. So we've got this thing. If I where's the original? I think this is the original. So if I right click, save link as to my SVG document, to my downloads, save it there. And if I go over to Illustrator, Control O to open, grab the Orlando Magic art, I can see how they made this thing. So for instance, this they didn't draw a blue shape that has this jaggedy thing in it for the letter. They just put the shape of the magical lightning bolt of the basketball on top of these letters. So the G continues below this thing, but they just dropped it there on top. Conversely, or in the similar style, this star sits on top. It looks like the star has its own outline, but in fact, it's just sitting on top of this shape with some extra points added to it to get that effect. All these other shapes are just drawn straight on top. This, if we were to take this apart a little bit, these are one thing. Come here with me. There we go. The basketball is just that guy. There were highlights on the basketball, which are these individual shapes like that. We've got this shape, which is its own thing. And then this shape is actually engaged with or part of the outer outline shape for the entire thing. So when you start picking these things apart, you can see the decisions that people made along the way in creating this art. I've also got, don't want to save it, thank you. This other freebie for you in the lecture 2.1, the Care Bears. So if I download the Care Bears, save it there, go back to Illustrator, Control O to open, Care Bears, open. That's great. Here is the flash or the concept art, design art for all the Care Bears. And if we zoom into any one of these guys, let's zoom into this guy. What's fascinating is these little shapes, while this looks like an outline, that would probably just, maybe you would assume just be the line that sits on the edge of the Care Bear. It's in fact the full shape of the head. So I can take that away and see what this shape is. And it's got this little cutout here, presumably so it's easy to animate the head, move the head around. If we zoom in on the ear, you can see they're not even using curves. It's just a lot of little solid points all the way around the edge. But if we take the ear away, let me grab all the shapes of the ear, take the ear out here. The ear is this shape, and then this shape cut out, and that's it. So they only drew those shapes, but they arranged them in that way and put them behind the shape of the head in order to give the impression that the leading edge of the head here is where the ear stops. So you're more than welcome to download the Care Bears art and see how they did these things. Like the rope is very similar to the garland that is in the thing that we have to trace here. So you might take a look at that and say, oh, so they drew like maybe the outside shape first, or they drew that independently, and then they have that thing separate like that. So maybe you could approach it like that. So the answers to some of the problems you're trying to solve you will discover might already be in a document like this, picking apart how someone else did their thing. We've got stripies, individual shapes, and even they didn't even care to like make that really sharp and clean. Just the impression of the roundness is probably something they were looking for with that outline shape. Is the bucket even? So the bucket is actually engaged with the overall outline shape of this Care Bear. And you can see how they might do clouds. Loads of fun. So that's for free for you guys if you want to play around with it, or if you just want to like print out the Care Bears and have it in your documents. Off you go. Cool. All right. So we'll cut it off there. We'll take a break. And if you have any, as always, if you have any questions, email me and I'll walk you through any kind of problem that you're trying to solve or talk things through with you. Since this is more a logic game than necessarily a deep understanding of the tools, sometimes it's helpful just to talk through the process. And then once you've got a plan, you'll find that it comes together pretty quickly. Okay, I'm going to end the broadcast there, and we'll catch you on the